Well, hello and welcome to the Being Formed podcast. My name is Adam Ormord, and I'm the host of the show, as well as the co-founder of LifePoint Resources, along with my wife, Rebecca. And today on the podcast, I'm joined by someone who has become a deeply valued part of the LifePoint community, Kim Van Natta. Kim Van Natta is a spiritual director, an Ignatian retreat guide, and someone whose work is centered around creating space for people to encounter God and to listen more deeply and to begin to live from the truest place of who they are. Kim brings a rich and integrative approach to spiritual formation, drawing from years in ministry and her training in spiritual direction, her extensive work with various formational cohorts, and even her invitation to encounter God through creation itself as a certified forest therapy guide. So, more than anything, Kim has a way of holding space that helps people slow down and become more aware and begin to recognize the presence of God in the midst of their actual lives. Kim is all about soul care, and so are we. In fact, here at LifePoint, Kim is helping us shape something we've been dreaming about for quite some time. She's leading the development of what we're calling the Sacred Way community. It's an 18-month journey of relational spiritual formation. And Kim will be serving as the very first director of a cohort learning environment for our ministry, for LifePoint Resources. So I'm so excited. And I'm really grateful for Kim. I'm grateful for her voice, her presence, and her partnership in this work. So welcome to the team, Kim, and welcome to the Being Formed podcast. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much.
Good. It's good to see you. And I know you just got back from a ministry trip overseas, which is really exciting. So I want to ask you a question that maybe you can relate right back to that trip. How is it with your soul today?
And I love when you ask that question on the podcast. I am very well. My soul is very full, and I have been savoring and lingering in gratitude since we got back last week. We went on a little bit of a trip to Germany to visit friends and then to visit other friends in Tirana, Albania. And they are a part of CRU, which is Campus Crusade for Christ. There's about 100 staff over there doing amazing things in Albania. And I was invited to come lead a soul care retreat for 15 women that attended. And we actually drove up into the mountains overlooking Tirana. And we provided a place of rest for them. Most of them considered retreat a place of work or getting more training and are filled with a bunch of stuff to do. And we offered a place of rest, learning about soul care, learning how to take care of themselves in busy life and ministry, and was received so well that they would like for us to come back and do more and offer it to more people. So we're very excited about that. And of course, I went over offering a gift. And as you know, when you bring things like that, you receive sometimes more than you give. And it was just a delight to be with these women, watch God at work in their hearts, and we just loved every minute of it. And of course, our hosts were so gracious and generous to us, and we loved it. So, and then we came home to Buena Vista, which is a new home for us, and we are happy to be sleeping in our own bed and actually taking kind of a mini retreat for myself to savor and linger in all the goodness of God to us every step of the way. So, very good place today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I didn't say I was going to mention this when we were hitting record, but I mean, we might as well just say it. You know, today's your birthday as well. So, I mean, your soul's got to just be, I'm hoping that your soul is in a really good place.
Exactly. Well, I'm thankful that God has breathed me into 64 years of life, and very happy about that. And I hope that I continue to get to do what I absolutely love to do. So, thank you.
Great. Yes. Well, happy birthday. You know, our conversation today, Kim, is all about introducing you to our Being Formed podcast community, and I think to a larger extent, our LifePoint Resources community. And it's also about sharing openly about our shared hopes and dreams for a brand new formational cohort called the Sacred Way Community, something that
Yes.
LifePoint Resources has wanted to do for, well, since we started this thing, since even before we started this thing. So, as we begin, I'm just curious, Kim, what was your first awareness or entry point into spiritual formation? Because you've been doing this in lots of circles for a long time. So, how did you first find your way into this kind of formational world language as a way of discipleship or just as a way of being with God and with others?
Well, my background is in Catholicism and school and church, of course. But in the late 90s, I actually came into a relationship with Jesus and understood what that meant and landed in a Protestant non-denominational secret church. And it was about a year later, a year and a half maybe, I ended up on staff full time, trying to discern and discover what God was doing, because this was a whole new world for me. And so I jumped in with both feet, and I was learning about leadership and doing every Beth Moore Bible study on the market. And we also did emotional health recovery courses and making peace with your past, things like that. So as I served in full-time ministry, I began leading those studies. I began planning and really running big events. I served with the senior pastor. I planned mission trips and went on mission trips. So by the end of 2004, I had basically perfected the first three stages of the spiritual journey as marked out in the book we love called The Critical Journey. And I had a relationship with Jesus. I had studied all about God and I had served God, and I hit a wall. And everything I tried to do to reconnect with God was dry and flat and lifeless. So what did I do? I re-upped my efforts to no avail. So in that place, I obviously was tired and exhausted, and I even didn't really like people anymore. And so I kind of knew I was in trouble. So I planned a self-directed retreat, time away. That time, I'm not sure I would have called it retreat, but this is what I did. I booked a hotel on the plaza in Kansas City, and I brought books and Bibles and journals and everything I could do to distract myself. And one day I decided, well, I'm going to go get Starbucks coffee, which is what you do on retreat, of course. And I walked in a Barnes and Noble. And as I was heading towards the Starbucks in the Barnes and Noble, there was a table of books that were yellow. And literally that book jumped off the table at me. And it was called Invitation to Solitude and Silence by Ruth Haley Barton. And I devoured that book in 2 days, which of course you're not supposed to do with a spiritual formation book. But it named me so perfectly. I was dangerously tired. And I had no idea what to do about that. And of course, from there, I found the Transforming Center, which is Ruth's organization. And she actually had a standalone retreat about 6 months later on this very topic and book. And during that retreat, I experienced such authenticity and vulnerability and a space of feeling loved on and heard and accepted for who I was that I literally cried 7 hours on the way home. I drove home from Chicago because God met me so powerfully. And of course, I thought, whatever this is, I want it. I just don't know how to get there. And so I signed up for what you know, as she has what's called a transforming community, which is a 2-year spiritual formation, spiritual community, where you attend 9 quarterly retreats over 2 years with the same group of people. And so it was really God's invitation for me into the deeper inner journey. And of course, I didn't really know what that meant at that time. But about the same time, I heard for the first time about spiritual direction from a pastor's conference where Brennan Manning was speaking. And so I was like, well, I don't even know what that is. So I searched on Amazon, I think, and found David Benner's book, The Sacred Companion, which told you about what that was. And whatever that was, again, I was like, whatever that is, I need to do it. So I kind of stalked David to find out if he did spiritual direction, because I didn't know where to find a spiritual director. And he actually connected me with my first director. And so that's kind of how I started this journey. And both were necessary to get where I am today.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I knew you went a ways back with Ruth Haley Barton. I didn't realize that all began in a bookstore in Kansas City. When you talk about joining the transforming community, how
Yes.
early on was that in the stage of Ruth's program? Because I'll just say I'm currently about to wrap up my 2-year cohort with Transforming Community, Ruth Haley Barton's program. I'm in Transforming Community number 20.
Well, I started in Transforming Community 3.
Wow. Okay. I didn't know that.
Yes. And I actually then went on to do another community where I began to serve. And over time, I served with them as a community coordinator for the retreats and also just serving in whatever capacity they needed for the cohorts, or they would call them communities. So, yeah. So actually, Adam, I have been in 6 communities with the Transforming Center and did my master's in spiritual transformation alongside a community. So that was TC6.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where was that through? What was that? Was that a partnership program?
Yes, with Northern Seminary.
Okay.
It was their first time to do that. That was the partnership with them. And so we did, of course, the experiential and academic part of course, you can read about spiritual formation, but you actually have to go through the process of experiencing that to understand it and live it out so that you can actually offer it to others, right? And so we did the academic through the seminary. And of course, Ruth was our readers for all of our papers that we turned in and books we read and all that kind of thing. And we also attended over that 2 years, those 9 retreats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. So clearly early on, you had a taste of this community cohort model of learning, formation, transformation, very impactful. Can you talk about the impact for you of that community aspect of your growth? Why did you go through 6 of these things, Kim?
Well, I'm a hot mess, Adam. That's probably why. No, I think part of me always just longed for something like that. I mean, my first experience of that probably was really getting into the local church, starting in small groups, being in that larger context and learning a little bit about what it was to be in a safe place and to be a safe person, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I also came to that community with just bringing all my unmet needs and expecting people to meet those needs, of course, which doesn't always go so well, right? And you also find out kind of that at that point for me, because this was really a new avenue, even in the church world and the Protestant world, that Christians hurt other Christians and they aren't always safe people. And that was kind of a new thing for me. So when I entered the transforming community, I really began, I think, to experience what was really well modeled authenticity, a place that was very welcoming. You were loved on. People modeled their vulnerability in a place that was safe, but they actually walked out what they were teaching. So I watched it happen with the people, with Ruth, the people that were serving, helping us to learn how to do that for ourselves and be those kinds of people to listen, to be a listening presence and listen well. And so it included being listened without judgment, without someone trying to fix me or spiritualize my struggles with a verse, or I need to pray more. And so I really learned how to do that for myself as well. And I learned that I had a created goodness that was was most true about me, not my sinfulness. And so it became a place that things went really from head knowledge to an embodied experience of God loving me and me feeling that love in a way, getting under that shame-based identity that I came in with, to experience that, no, I truly am loved in all of my mess and all my brokenness and all my sinfulness. And so I was able to bring questions and doubts and things that weren't making sense at my space at the church anymore or within that community, things that I was questioning about God or about my upbringing and how things were working in that space. And so it became a very welcoming space, an invitational space, even from God. I just gently felt God inviting me towards the healing and wholeness and providing enough experiential knowing that God loved me for me and my own belovedness and not from all the mess. But also I think I learned from them and from that space that I had a true essence, a true way and unique way I was created that I had been trying to identify outside myself and know that God was within me and knew who I was, and I could tap into that more clearly and more truthfully in that place. And people were calling that out in me as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Just even that idea of I trying to identify outside of yourself. You were working in a church, yeah, and some of the things I'm hearing you describe are very much like you said in this space of like stage 3 serving, like we put everything we have into trying to serve and find our identity oftentimes from those outside sources of approval, what we're doing for God, what we're able to accomplish for the kingdom, this kind of idea. And so, yeah, I hear you saying that oftentimes in those spaces where we're coming from, in your case, the church, and same with me, when we're in stage 3, we begin to ask some questions. They're mostly questions about ourselves. They're questions about God too, and how these two things, how we interact with each other. What's the truth? Who's the real God that we are envisioning as we're serving God? Sometimes those questions don't feel safe in that stage 3 environment. So you describe like hitting that wall. You're kind of like, okay, my questions, I don't know who to talk to about this anymore. I don't know how to move through this. I don't know. These are scaring me. I remember some of the questions that began to form in me were kind of scary questions. Rebecca would say the same thing, ways of thinking about the way we thought about the Bible, for example. And we're not talking about anything that's moving into heresy or anything like this. We're not jettisoning our faith, but you just begin to notice some of the spaces that we're in. They don't lend themselves well to this kind of questioning, movement, deepening, curiosity. Something's not working. What am I going to do? Right. And so these formational cohort kind of spaces can oftentimes provide a place. That's true for me too.
Yeah. And when you're in full-time ministry, you begin to realize that your community sometimes isn't really your community, and you need a place outside of that context
Very true.
to feel safe, to be asking those hard questions, to process through hard things that have happened at the church or with people or your own life and emotions and past hurts and those kinds of things that may not necessarily, I mean, at our church, we were a little bit leaned more to that, but also as a person that was very visible in the church, you didn't feel necessarily always safe to be able to be that fully human person. Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay, well, that was years ago. Fast forward, we are in a post-COVID era. We are in, it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you want to fall on here. I think we can all agree we are in a polarized culture and time, an extremely isolated time. What are you noticing, even just as I say that, around you and people maybe you meet with in spiritual direction or in other forms of ministry that makes this kind of community feel even more necessary now?
I just think with COVID and social media and all the things that really prevent us from being in deep, meaningful connection with other people. And we're more lonely, we're more disconnected, and we don't necessarily know how to do that. And we have these other avenues that we go down rabbit holes to feel like we're being connected. And in actuality, it's very surface and not on those deeper levels that God's inviting us into, I think. I mean, I moving into a new town in the last 4 months, trying to make those connections, you really begin to notice that people kind of, they're not sure. Do we want to keep you at a distance for a little bit? Not sure if you're somebody that's going to be around long enough or whatever. And so as, human beings that were created to be relational, we are missing out here. We are really missing out.
Yeah, yeah. Both of us share a love for Todd Hall, the author, and he uses the language other people do as well of a connection crisis. We are in the midst of a connection crisis, and I certainly can resonate with that in my own journey. I mean, it's interesting for me to just notice and name that for years, 25 years ish, my wife and I worked in the local church context. Even before that, I grew up in the church my whole life. Uh, I had built-in community, but it's only been in the last 7 years. And again, this is pre-COVID that I wasn't working full-time in the church. I was doing some missions work with another organization, and then I was launching this ministry. Suddenly, I didn't have that community that was kind of there for me. I appreciate what you already said about it is its own kind of community, right? When you work in that setting. But I at least I had something. And on
Yes.
the other side of that, I have found how true this really is, that you could call it all the things we've already listed, the circumstances that are kind of in place in culture right now, not also just my age, my wife's age, our stage of life. We cannot expect the church, for example, to be for us what it was for us when we were in our 20s and we had little kids at home and we had a different kind of connection with people than we do now in the stage of life we're in, where we're grandparents, right? So it's not even really fair for me to expect the same things, but I certainly do feel it. I feel how difficult it is to create the kind of connection and community that I long for.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think we come expecting the church to give us everything we need, and it
Yeah.
cannot do that.
Right. We can't expect that. I think I'm the language I'm using around that right now is just I can't ask the church to create something for me that maybe it used to be able to do. I don't even know if it used to do all it that well, because again, I was in a different kind of situation, but it doesn't feel like that's what it's doing now. And so it's not fair for me to just keep coming back to the church and saying, come on, why can't you? Why can't you do this for me? That's not loving. That's not the kind of person I want to be. So, again, where are these formational spaces and communities that can hold us in community for a long time? Right. And I know there's this desire to say, why do we have to leave the church to go get this? Why can't we have it in the church? And I'm just saying, yeah, I would love that too. I would love that too, to have this within the church. And at the same time, I just recognize the power of pulling away. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about
Yes.
what this community is for. Who's it for? When we think about this community launching, Kim, we've had some conversations. Who do we think this is for? What kind of people would benefit from this?
Well, I tell you, coming from doing the retreat in Albania and giving each woman the space to name where they find themselves in that moment, they were exhausted. They were busy. Nothing was working. And I think life and ministry had taken over and they didn't know how to rest, or what to do with that, or even, we talk about certainty-based spirituality. Like there's a certain way to do things, right? And there's almost, there's a new way that God's inviting people to relate to him. And that's the thing that I was able to offer them is just a glimpse of there's something more. And maybe that is that. I had conversations where they were longing for more of God than they had right now, but they had no idea how to get there, right? We talked about the disconnection. People are so disconnected from themselves, I think, from other people, and especially from God. How do we really let God be with us in those places? And sometimes, again, it requires us to go outside of our environments to find that. I know that people who are, we'll talk a little bit, I'm sure, about attachment theory and having a secure attachment and where do we find that and how do we get that with others and how do we get a deeper relational connection with people and ourselves and with God. I mean, I think people are searching for that. I know even deconstructing, like when we're asking those questions that nobody's wanting to answer or don't have the answers themselves, right? And things begin to fall apart, or even, like I said, we're hurt by people in the church, or we're hurt by a particular theology that's not loving and kind. And, I think we go, where do we go with those things? What do we do with that?
Yeah. Yeah. Everything you've just named. Yes. Come on, preach it. Like, yes, and may it be so. Disillusioned, discouraged, disconnected, in transition. I think about people like we're talking about on that developmental kind of stages of faith. People who are maybe in some place of transition from like deconstruction to a reconstruction where they're not wanting to, again, walk away from God, not by any stretch of the imagination, but what does it mean to have something with God that actually experientially, emotionally, like holistically addresses the whole of their lives and their relationships in a way that brings a greater sense of their own belovedness and into the world, yeah,
Their own
that's
personhood, right? Who is God uniquely created them to be and reflect to the world? And we don't know how to get there because we all have these protective, adaptive, false self ways of being to get unmet needs met. And how do we come truer? Like, how do we do that? What does that look like? And I think all these things, and we've talked about it, I just find that they're really strong invitations from God to a spiritual transition. And I don't know that we have had the language for folks in the church to know that this is an invitation from God.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's an invitation into maybe a different way, a way we're calling the sacred way, Kim. I love that language, the sacred way community. What do we mean by that? What are we talking about? I'll just kick this off by bringing up, I think John 10:10 is the verse that kicks everything up for me. Jesus is just saying to us, the enemy has come to steal and kill and destroy, but I've come that you might have life and have it to the fullest, right? And I hear in that this abundant life, this holistic life, this life that's uniquely our life, the way God made us, and finally embracing that and moving into that space with God. This side of heaven is what I'm really interested in. So, I'm just thinking about how do we get on this journey with Jesus that puts us in direct contact with Him and with other people in this experiential way where we learn how to do life Jesus way. And I remember, I think it's Chris Hall, I think, in one of his books, A Different Kind of Way, who kind of think is the one who I remember saying this so succinctly. He's like, we can't expect to live the Jesus life, which is kind of what we all talk about. We want the Jesus life, unless we're willing to live the Jesus way. So there's a way Jesus lived his life that we can learn from. And so there's a lot of ways I feel like this connects for me. And I will also just say this is very much connected to me from my own experience on the Camino as a
Yes.
pilgrim and the way. And so this is very much a bringing together for me everything that I think is most important in my life. This idea of our lives as pilgrimage, our journey with Jesus as a pilgrimage, a long obedience in the same direction. It is also this sense of relational connection that we see in Jesus. We hear him talk
Yes.
about it, we see him model it, we know the reality of where he has come from, one of the Trinity himself.
Yes.
And so all of this for me is coming to play in this language. But what about you? What strikes you in this?
Well, I think a lot of it is like we want this flourishing, fully alive life. And again, we don't know how to get there. And we know it's a process. I know you had referenced Robert Mulholland's definition, and Ruth had kind of added to it that spiritual transformation is a process. We don't like process either. And it's slow, right? It's a slow work of God, but it's the process of being formed into the image of Christ for the glory of God, for the abundance of our own lives, and then for the sake of others. But we kind of have it backwards in the church. We're for the sake of others, and yet we haven't really experienced for ourselves the deep knowing of what this fully alive life could be.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for bringing that around again. That definition that Robert Mulholland created, and then kind of Ruth took a bit, and that's really that's the core of our definition at Life Point. I mean, we add this one little piece. It's a lifelong process of experiencing God's love, and that is then through that being formed in the image of Christ for the sake of the world. I sum it up by simply, how do you experience God's love? Probably the best these days, learning how to be with Jesus. Be with Jesus on the way. So
Yes.
be with Jesus and become people of love.
And we have to, I think that's our calling, becoming more loving. But how do we do that? We have to first allow ourselves and open ourselves to be loved by Jesus so that we can do that for others.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we already brought up a little bit of a specific focus in this new community. It's going to be important for us to frame everything we're doing around what we call relational spirituality. Now, you can call it relational theology. I know some folks who would call it that. Relational spirituality. Let's just discuss a little bit about what we mean by that. And we're very thankful for, again, the voice of Todd Hall and his book, Relational Spirituality. And that'll certainly be a part of our cohort experience. But why do we want relational spirituality to be at the core of our experience together?
I think it's because, first and foremost, God is a triune God. He is in relationship. That's our core theology. God does things in relationship and wants relationship with us. So how do we nurture that first and foremost? And now we have so many ways of understanding that better, and we have more avenues of growth and healing. I mean, we have the biblical and theological foundation of being created for relationship. We have neuroscience and neurotherapy now that backs that up. I mean, I remember reading Anatomy of the Soul that Kirk Thompson said, our brains change in relationship. And we have to have these safe, secure relationships where we are seen and known so that we can change. And that is experiential, right? That is in relationships, that is in community. And it's also an embodied practice that goes along with that. And I also think now, too, with psychology, we have a lot written now about attachment theory. I know you've interviewed a couple of folks regarding that topic. And that really is related to where, as infants and children, We needed experiences of a secure attachment with primary caregivers, but we also needed that with God. And when we didn't get that, of course, we put that experience of insecure attachments on God. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've got attachment, we've got um, the ways in which we can maybe grow towards secure attachment with God. And I think all of this is also going to get us to some of the language that Todd Hall uses around like deep growth. He's talking about like at the core of what we're trying to do, we're using whatever is available to us. You talked about attachment theory. We've got all kinds of other ways that we can look at brain science and brain scanning to see the reality of the truth of this, how we were made to be in relationship with others, and what happens when we tell our stories in safe places, that things begin to get rewired, that attachment can happen, secure attachment can happen with God. This is really, as we're moving into deep growth, that we're recognizing this isn't the kind of thing that happens overnight. It doesn't even happen in a year and a half, right, Kim? We can't promise a guarantee, outcome here of what's going to happen in 18 months. We do know that the path, the way with Jesus is what we're trying to allow people to be on in a relational kind of way, where we're modeling it. We're pointing people back to the relational love of God. It's for us first. There's so many ways we're going to tackle this. So many ways we're going to come at this over the course of 18 months. Everything's going to have a movement toward this deep growth. And what I would say also, like just even listening to Todd Hall talk about that, the goal of deep growth, he says, is to change our implicit relational knowledge, or what he would call our implicit self, to become more Christ-like and more loving.
Yes,
I love
absolutely.
that. So, yeah, because he talks about like two ways of knowing. There's an explicit way. You described knowing that very, very well through your years of study and knowledge and growing in knowledge of God. And then this implicit kind of memory that's much quicker, it's more rapid. It's often below the conscious, but it's telling us lots of narratives, lots of stories. We're believing without even knowing we are. So the goal of growth in this relational journey is to become more Christ-like and more loving by recognizing these messages that are there, and they're playing into every way we engage God, every way we engage the work that we think we're doing for God instead of with God. And so, yeah, that's where we're heading. And all of these processes that Todd Hall talks about, kind of, they don't look like a straight line. They look more like a spiral, right? A deepening spiral. So that's what we're after here. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think it's providing that space and that sacred space for God to do what only God can do, right? And providing ways to open to that.
Do we believe that this is what God wants to do in us and for us at the core of who we are? And I hope that people, as they're listening, will just sit with that, linger with that right there. Do you believe that this is the journey that God has you on? That there's more to this life than this sense of like trying to work for God or from God, some of that language of like these postures, but with God. What does the with God invitation look like for you? And to recognize the love of God and the delight of God for you in the midst of your everyday living. So let's move here as we're really dialing in on what we're hoping to design and build and offer. The shape and the rhythm of this formational cohort, Kim. I'm so glad that you've experienced this in a myriad of ways, and you can help navigate us into this way of learning. It's 18 months, right? We've already said that. Tell everybody what we're looking at in terms of the rhythm and the length and the shape of this thing.
Yeah, actually, we're hoping to actually planning on starting in September of 2027, which
That's
is
right.
very exciting. And I might get animated as we start talking about it. But we are really inspiring to create this journey this way with Jesus through 7 quarterly retreats over that 18-month period. We are going to aspire to create a loving, a presence, intentional, safe spiritual community where you can be experience all the things that we have been talking about, really to be fully known, to learn to be a soul in God's presence, to foster these kinds of practices, contemplative and embodied experiences, so that you can, begin to open to what God is doing in that. We'll have a way through the quarter for you to intentionally have invitations to be with God, things that we've opened to you on each retreat, a certain particular teaching, perhaps some books that we may invite you to read, uh, different practices or spiritual practices that you can continue to explore and try and see if they're the ways that God's inviting you to connect with Him in a new way. And then perhaps reflection at the end. Part of the retreats, we will also invite you into some sort of a smaller group that will become a listening group and providing the different structure that would keep that non-judgmental and safe and secure, and help you also become that kind of person to listen well and to be that loving listening presence for someone else. Yeah, so there's a little bit of that. Did I miss anything?
Yeah. Well, no, I think you got it. It was great. There's 7 retreats. We're designing them to be 3 nights long. 3 nights, coming in on like a Thursday by dinner and leaving on a Sunday morning after breakfast, or some kind of a morning closing kind of a thing. Yeah, 7 of those. One at the very beginning of the experience of 18 months, one at the very end. And I want to just also add this, Kim. I think I've told you about this, but my idea for after the 7th retreat would be an optional capstone opportunity for people who are able bodied enough to do this, to actually go walk the Camino in Spain.
Sign
So
me
after
up.
that, after that 7th retreat, we would have something in place for people to actually be able to go put into practice with the people they've been journeying with, right? This actual embodied way, sacred way
Yes.
kind of thing. So
Yes.
cool, huh?
We're going to literally walk it out.
We're going to walk it out. That's so cool.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Wow. All right. Well, we think about, as we're going to land the plane here, this particular kind of learning environment. We think about other learning environments you've been a part of, I've been a part of. Again, what feels different about this kind of learning environment compared to what people have experienced maybe in the past?
Yeah, I think, we think about that. It's small groups or discipleship learning, and we've experienced that through our churches and different things like that. And, sometimes those are, very, very time limited, and people can step in and out of those. In our experience, we will have the same group of people over the 18-month experience. We're going to be a little bit more intentional and themed about this journey and building on, each retreat to get them to a particular way towards the end. Will be very experiential knowing and invitational. And of course, I think there is something about process and the time it takes with a particular group of people to go deeper and get more vulnerable, and just that safety of going deeper with our stories and being able to share things maybe we've never shared before, because you're journeying with this same group of people.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, we already mentioned at LifePoint, we talk about being with Jesus and becoming people of love. Also, we believe we're always on this formational journey. Like we, as a lifelong process, we're not there yet. You are not there. I'm not there. I mean, it's really cool, Kim, that you've got enough experience and desire and passion to step into this role as a director for us. I still can't believe it.
Still in awe that I'm being invited to this
Oh my
amazing
gosh.
thing.
I can't believe it. I cannot believe it. Okay. So yeah, I want to put you on a pedestal and say, wow, Director Kim, let's just
Please don't.
acknowledge right here and now that we both have growth edges in our own transformational journey with Jesus, right? And
Yes.
everybody does. So how about you? Where are you sensing an invitation right now, Kim, toward your own deeper formation in your life, toward that becoming a person of love, even more so?
Well, I have felt a strong invitation. And honestly, this came from your Camino podcast in the fall of making my way by walking
Mhm.
and really inviting Jesus into that. And so it has become a new practice for me as and we've moved down here. We live 2 blocks from the Arkansas River, and we have beautiful 14ers on the other side of the valley. For anybody that doesn't know what that means, so 14,000-foot mountains that are now
Mhm.
covered with snow peaks. And I'm just being invited to let Jesus be with me in those walks and connecting in a new way to, I found myself in places where I've had some conflict recently, and I've felt some deep anger, and I'm noticing my body stomping out my anger, right? And inviting the Lord into it and finding myself along the way in tears. So it's kind of a new embodied way for me to let the Lord be with me. And then I've just had sweet moments like last Friday morning, I was out, and again, I'm listening to a podcast with Deb that you were talking about spiritual wayfinding and just doing an awe walk and allowing what is it that the Lord wants to show me in that moment? Where can I be in awe of Him and what He's doing in me? And where are the metaphors that are pertaining to my life right now? And it has just been a delight. So I look forward to my walks every morning, and I get excited about when I'm going to leave. And so it's been, it's just been fun. It's been a lot of fun.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. For me, I get so excited about these things that are coming in the future, things I've been anticipating for years. It's sometimes hard for me to be in the present. And I even just the other day was in my own spiritual director's office talking about kind of big decisions and discernment things and what I felt like the Lord was inviting me into today. And my director just said so simply, said, she just said, I keep hearing these two words, rest and trust. And then she said, two things you can only do in the present. I was just like, oh my
Man,
goodness, what? Yes,
yes.
can you say that again? And she just said it again. I'm like, rest and trust. Two things you can only do in the present. And that's my desire, is to be more in the present moment. Like I
Yeah.
was, on the Camino a year ago, to be in the present moment, noticing Jesus with me and to receive his invitation into those two things, into rest and to trust. So for me, I would wonder, everyone who's listening, that question is for you. Where are you sensing an invitation toward deeper formation in your life? As you've listened to our conversation, I'm just wondering what's been stirring in you. So, our first cohort of the Sacred Way retreat will kick off in September 2027. It's a long ways away, but it's never too early to start discerning with God whether or not something like this would be doable for you. So we're going to post a link in the chat for people to fill out a short interest form just so they can get more information as plans start to get solidified for this first 18-month cohort of the Sacred Way community. In the meantime, I just want to let people know you might want to consider attending one of our ministry's smaller versions. It's called the Sacred Way Retreat. We've got one in Nashville. We've got one in Breckenridge. Those are 3-night retreats, and they're intentionally designed to give participants a taste of the Jesus way, which I think of as a life of love and purpose, a life of abiding and receiving, a life of humble sacrifice and willing surrender, a life from a place of secure attachment to God. So if you want to sign up for one of our retreats, let us know by sending an email to help@lifepointresources.org, or you can visit lifepointresources.org to learn more. So Kim, thank you for your time today. Thank you for the time.
Loved every moment of it.
Thank you for the time you're about to just invest in as we move forward with this whole thing. Thanks for your heart. Thanks for your time. Thanks for who you are. Thanks for the gift of your life. Would you pray for those who are listening right now and just considering this relational and formational invitation?
I will. Thank you for the opportunity. So, Lord, I just hold all of this before you, and I ask for the ways that you help us to listen to our desires and our deepest longings, in the ways that you invite us into these new ways of relating to you. And I pray that if anyone had a little nudge or a visceral reaction, or just feels like something's missing, or they are longing for those kinds of things in their life right now, that you would give them the courage and the space to take this step into this new way, this way with Jesus. So we thank you, Lord, for this opportunity. We thank you for how you're already going before us, and we are already praying for those who are coming. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Again, thank you, Kim. Thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks for sharing these podcasts with others, getting the word out about LifePoint Resources and the Being Formed podcast. Thanks be to God for all the incredible provision and goodness that he provides, not only to us, but to everybody listening. God is a good God. So until next time, everybody, grace and peace.